So for context, when I was younger, I had been diagnosed with epilepsy pretty young. It was quite unfortunate because my parents were not really well equipped to deal with that sort of thing, emotionally, or mentally, and they started treating me like some sort of diseased child whom they could not deal with. I think I must have been around 6 years old when I first noticed how differently they treated my brother and me. My brother was 3 years older than me and my parents treated him far better than they treated me, presumably because he was much easier to deal with, as compared to me. And as epilepsy was not enough on its own, the cherry on top was when I was diagnosed with dyslexia and severe ADHD, at the age of 8. Needless to say, my parents kind of had their hands full with me. Now it would be one thing if they were nice and kind people who were grateful to have a child and were up for the challenge, because I know that it cannot be easy being a parent to a special needs child. But they were the ones who had decided to have a baby. They should have been prepared for what comes with it. I guess they had just assumed that since my brother had turned out perfectly healthy and fine, I would be absolutely healthy as well, and did not see this coming. And now, since I had been born already, they had no choice but to deal with me. They made sure that I felt that way as well, like they were tolerating me, and it was not nice. I did not have a very fun and normal childhood like most people, not just because of my illnesses, but also because of my parents. In fact, I would like to say that most of my childhood misery was caused to me by my parents, not my illnesses. That was a very small part of it, but the way they responded to it and treated me, that's what really made me upset. They always treated me like a pariah in my own family, and I never felt included, and they made sure to make me feel like an unwanted burden on the family. They would walk on eggshells around me, and it was like every time I would walk into a room, they would stop talking instantly, and all their life would be sucked out of that room, just because I had arrived. And this is how they would treat me when I was literally under 10 years of age, so it only got worse with time, and my mental health was pretty fragile. I just could not take it. So I started misbehaving in my teenage years, and I guess the adolescent hormones, combined with the misery of growing up in a home where I always felt like I was not wanted, it just broke my heart, and I started acting out. I stopped putting any effort into studying and started flunking out of all my classes on purpose, just because I was so angry with my parents and how they were treating me. I was defiant, disobedient, and downright rude to everybody that I knew. I was pushing everybody away, even my friends, and I knew that it was not the right thing to do, but I was just so miserable that I did not know how else to get my parents to pay attention to me. Even then, they did not seem to care much. Every time they would be summoned by the school, just because I had broken a rule or misbehaved in some way, they would just sigh in disappointment, but not even bother to reprimand me. It was incredibly frustrating, and I hated being with them. I would even throw temper tantrums in the house and try to get their attention that way, but then, they would just ignore me altogether and talk among themselves, not even bothering to lower their voices so that I wouldn't be able to hear them. They would say things like I was having a fit again and would keep rolling their eyes at me and telling me to be normal. That was the most that I could get out of them, and it was just really heartbreaking for me. But then, when I was 14, I broke a major rule in school, and I decided to go crazy and brought a pack of cigarettes to school and started smoking one right in the middle of class. And then, when my teacher demanded that I stop and told me to get out of class, I flipped him off. That was pretty much the last straw for me, because I had already been quite a troublemaker at school before that, but I had always been off the hook because my parents would tell everyone that I was not a normal kid and that I was not exactly right in the head, so they had to excuse my behavior. But after that, there was no going back. I got expelled, and that was the one time that my parents were actually furious with me. They really tore into me that day and said a lot of things that I don't think I will ever be able to forget or forgive. It was not things that I did not know already, but it just hurt to hear them actually say it out loud. They told me that they regretted ever having me, and had they known that I would turn out to be such a psychotic little kid, they never would have gone on with the pregnancy and would have terminated it as soon as they found out. They called me a burden on the family and said that they were better off when they had just one son, so now they were going to make sure that I left the family and never came back again. I was grounded for 1 week, and for that 1 week, they literally locked me in my room. They did not allow me to come out for anything, apart from bathroom breaks, and even my meals were sent up to me in my room. I was not allowed to go anywhere or speak to anybody, and I was absolutely miserable. I kind of felt like a prisoner in solitary confinement, except that this was much worse because it was my own parents that were doing it to me, and I don't think I had committed a crime, as such. I had just been acting out, and I think that was kind of on them because they had never given the kind of attention that I wanted. Or rather, needed, because I was a child and they should have been good parents to me. They were the ones who screwed up, and I am ready to admit that I was not the easiest to deal with all my illnesses, but they should have been considered that. They should have thought things through before they decided to have a baby. Anyway, after 1 week of being treated like that, I finally found out what they had meant when they said that I would never be allowed back into the family again. Out of the blue one day, my parents told me to get into the car with all my stuff. My brother and my mom packed my things for me while I waited in the car, and about an hour later, I was all packed and we were driving. It was a familiar route, and in a few minutes, I realized that we were heading to my grandmother's place, my dad's mom. So in my head, I thought that maybe they were going to let me live there for a couple of weeks to get my head on straight. because I knew that my grandma was a strict disciplinarian, but I also knew that she had a soft spot for me and treated me much better than my parents. I did not think it was going to be a punishment for me as such, but once I got there, I realized that this was not going to be a temporary arrangement. They were, in fact, dumping me at my grandmother's house so that she could raise me. Because they were giving up on me and they did not want me around anymore. That's what they had taken that 1 week for, to convince my grandmother to raise me. When we reached my grandmother's house, my parents brought out all my things, left them at the door, and told me to carry them all in. They told me that this was going to be my new home now and said that they did not want any contact with me ever again, especially not after what I had done. According to them, I had been trying my best to ruin their reputation, but now, I had crossed a line and I could not take it back. While we were at the door, I tried to beg them not to do this because in spite of everything, I still wanted to have a relationship with my parents. I don't know why. I was 14 and I was desperate to have some sense of belongingness in my family, so it was quite difficult for me to leave with the fact that they were dumping me at my grandma's place. I was also slightly concerned about the fact that my grandma probably would not be able to take care of me, which is why it had taken her 1 week to accept me, since she was getting old and was already in her 60s. I knew that my grandmother loved me, but I didn't know if she actually wanted to take me in, so I felt like I was just going to go from being a burden to my parents to being a burden to my grandmother. I did not want to disappoint her because even in the past, whenever I would visit her and she would learn about the things that I had been pulling off at home and at school, she would be quite disappointed, but then she would always encourage me and tell me that she knew I was made of stronger stuff, tried to convince me that my parents would come around if I behaved better and had faith in me. That was another reason why I did not want to move in with my grandmother, because I felt like she would start resenting me as well, just like my parents had, and I could not afford to lose her too. It was kinda complicated. So I tried to beg them to let me stay with them, but they told me that they had made up their mind. Right in front of me, they told my grandmother that they were done with me and did not even want to hear about me. And then, they said that they did not want a freak like me living with them anymore, and wanted to focus on my very normal brother, which is what really got to me. Because that's the kind of language that bullies at school used for me, to make fun of me, and it really hurt me to hear my parents using the same kind of words for me. Because it was one thing for the mean kids at school to say it to me, it did not affect me as much because I was used to it. But when I heard my parents call me a freak, I realized that they were the biggest bullies of my life, and actually, they were doing me a huge favor by letting me live with my grandma, because they never loved me no matter what I did, and I bet that even if I had behaved better, they probably wouldn't have cared, because to them, my brother was the only child they had. So after that point, I stopped begging and I accepted the fact that I was now going to live with my grandma, and I decided, in my head, that I was going to be better. Because I deserved better and so did my grandma, and I was not going to throw away my life, just because my parents did not love me. Once my parents had left, my grandmother and I sat down and had a conversation that was much needed. She told me, very transparently, that even though she loved me, she had not exactly been ready to take me in. And she had a number of concerns about me because she had heard about the way that I had been behaving for my father and had said that at her age, it was not going to be possible for her to handle a troubled kid like me. She said that she understood that I needed help, but she was not sure if she would be able to provide the right kind of space for me to grow up in. And that's why she had been holding out about whether she should take me in or not. That was why it had taken her 1 week to come to that decision, but after my father told her that he had grounded me and had just kept me locked in my room for the 1 week that she had been thinking about what to do, she decided that her son was not the right kind of parent to raise me. And apologized to me for not intervening before, since she also had herself to worry about. She was a widow and did not have much of her own, so she was not sure if taking me in and adopting me would be the right thing to do, but now that she had learned how badly I was being treated, she could understand why I was acting out the way that I was. And told me that she wanted a fresh start with me, and wanted to do right by me, unlike my parents. She said that I should look at this as an opportunity, and that's what I did. I apologized to her for everything that I had done in the past, and I told her that I forgive her for not intervening before and not adopting me earlier, in spite of knowing how badly I was being treated by my parents. So we decided to put everything in the past and work together so that I could have a better future. And I always am, always will be, thankful to my grandmother for everything that she has done for me, because I truly do not think that I would have become the person that I am today if she had not been a part of my life and had not decided to take me in. I pretty much turned my life around after that day, with the help of my grandmother, and that's why I am where I am today. After I moved in with my grandma, I made a conscious effort to be better at everything that I did, and even she tried to do right by me, help me, and provide me with the kind of space that I needed to excel in what I did. She got the right tutors for me to help me with my academics and even enrolled me in private school and made sure that everybody knew that I had needs to be catered to, so they would not treat me like every other student. But unlike my parents, she did not use it as an excuse but used it as a reason to provide me with the help that I obviously needed. And it did help me, which is probably why I was able to graduate with a good score and go to college. Like any other kid, I was able to do everything that I wanted to, and for that, I only have my grandmother to thank. My parents continued to visit my grandmother occasionally, but they would never see me and I could stay out of their way. Every time that my parents would visit, I would leave the house and only come back after I knew for a fact that they had left. They did not seem to care about this, and neither did I. That went on for a couple of years. But then, my grandmother had a big fight with them about this and told them that they were horrible parents for not even attempting to talk to me, especially when I was doing better and they had a reason to talk to me and apologize for what they had done. They refused to even acknowledge that they had made a mistake while raising me and pretended like they were perfect parents. I was just a bad kid. They had called me a rotten apple and a freak, yet again, and my grandma lost it. So she told them never to come back, and they stuck to it. They were so egoistic that they just couldn't accept the fact that they were not good parents to me, and that's why I had turned out the way that I did when I was 14, but because of my grandma's guidance, I had improved. And yet, they did not seem to be able to comprehend that. So after that, there was no talking to them anymore. For almost 10 years, my grandma and I did not talk to them and pretended like these people never existed for us. I achieved so much and hit so many milestones, but I never spoke to my parents, and neither did they ever reach out to me, even though I had social media and I had never blocked them. They could have reached out to me, they just chose not to, and only now have they reached out to me. And that's because my grandma passed away a couple of months ago. It was very upsetting for me, since she was the only person that I had who genuinely had my back, no matter what. Even though we had not been living together for the past couple of years, since I moved out for college and then graduated, and got a place of my own. She was still my rock and my support system, so life has been very different without her, and I was still trying to cope with her loss when I heard from my parents. Not even 6 months have passed since she passed away, but they are already at my door, demanding that I share my inheritance with them because apparently, my very normal and healthy brother is not doing better than I am, as they had expected. And now, they need my help to clean up the mess that he had made. They visited me a few days ago, and my brother was not with them, which was surprising because before that, every time they would visit, my brother would always come along. I decided to interact with them and talk to them because I had actually thought that they were here to apologize, but after a bit of small talk and condolences, they came straight to the point. They told me that while he was in college, my brother had developed a bit of a drug habit, and now, it had started affecting his ability to work. I don't know why they were trying to downplay it, because from what I gathered, he was in serious trouble and needed help. So now, they wanted me to share my inheritance with them, whenever I would come into the money, so they would be able to pay for rehab. I asked them why he could not just attend one of the low-cost programs, which they could afford, and they told me that they had tried, but it was not good enough for him, and he needed a residential program which apparently cost a lot. Now, I personally don't know anybody who has been to rehab, and I don't know how much it costs, and I'm not going to do enough work to actually find out the cost. All I know is that I have my own money now since I have a good job. I'm comfortable, and I know that my grandmother was also pretty well off since my grandfather had left her a lot of money and she had invested it pretty carefully, which is really good for me, but bad for my parents, because in spite of knowing that, they were too proud to keep in touch with her. Or even apologize to her towards the very end, knowing that they would probably need the money. Anyway, I did not care about any of that. I just told my parents that I was ready to help them out with whatever amount they needed, but there was just one condition that I had. And that was that they would have to publicly acknowledge everything that they had done in the past, the terrible way that they had treated me, the things that they had said to me, and also the way that they had treated my grandmother. And then, I wanted them to also acknowledge that now, they needed my help, and why they needed the money from me so that everybody would be able to know what was going on with us. Because for years, we had kept things private, because my grandma did not want any drama. But now that they had come to me and had the audacity to ask me for help, to share my grandmother's money with them, in spite of the way that they had been treating us for the past 10 years, I thought that this was necessary. I did not feel bad in the slightest while asking this of them, since I wanted them to publicly say everything that they had done wrong. And when I said this to them, their faces literally fell. They tried to negotiate with me and told me that I was being unreasonable and kind of selfish, but I told them that this was my condition, and they could take it or leave it. I had no issues with providing them with the money that they needed. I had nothing against my brother anymore, and neither did they have anything against them. But they definitely would have to acknowledge what they did in order for me to completely move on from what had happened. Because they had treated me badly, there was no way around it. And they had also not been nice to my grandmother, and this was the money that we were talking about. So if they wanted her money, they had to acknowledge what they had done. It was as simple as that. I don't know why they are being so weird about it. But when I told them this, they started calling me heartless, emotionless, and said that they had never expected something like this from me. I told them they shouldn't have expected anything from me at all, given the fact that we hadn't even been speaking for the past 10 years. And now, if they wanted my help, they would have to acknowledge and accept their mistakes and apologize for them. That is it. I do not want to hear anything more about it. They left after that, after a lot of crying and accusations, but I did not budge. And now, they are trying to change my mind and telling me that my brother is in a really bad condition and that he needs my help, but I don't understand why they expect me to just do things for them when I never expected them to do anything for me. My grandmother and I only had each other. They never bothered to help us or even check up on how we were doing. Even when my grandmother passed away, they probably would not have been able to find out unless I hadn't told my relatives, and that's how they even came to know about the funeral and stuff. So why should I help people who have had nothing to do with us for the past 10 years? Even then, I just want to make sure, Ida, for telling my parents that I won't help them financially if they don't accept and acknowledge their mistakes publicly. Update 1. Thank you for all the comments on my original post. I am doing just fine, thank you so much for asking. It has been really difficult for me to deal with the loss of my grandmother, but she was really old and I'm glad that she's in a better place now. She lived her life to the fullest, and I know that she did not pass away with any regrets. So thank you for the concern and the condolences. Anyway, coming to my parents, are still trying to bother me online, but I have told them that if they don't do as I said, they can give up any hope of inheriting any money. I know that my grandmother left everything to me in her will, and I am sure that my parents know about it as well since the lawyer had sent out an email. And now, all they can do is sit and wallow in the retreat. I'm not going to go back on my word. It has been 1 week since I last spoke to them, and since none of their pleas have been working with me, they have resorted to sending me photos of my brother, and he looks bad. He is in a pathetic condition and they keep sending me pictures of him, telling me that this is the guy who needs my help, and that I should really step up and do something for him. To that, I only have one thing to say: where were they when I needed that kind of help? They abandoned me, and I was just lucky that my grandmother had my back, but otherwise, I don't know where I would have ended up. They did not care about me, and as much as I feel bad for my brother, I can't help them if they don't apologize for what they did. And it has to be public because I want everyone to know what kind of people they really are. If they can keep their egos aside, just for this one thing, I guess I'll help them out. Because honestly, for me, it's about shattering their pride. It was their pride that made them do everything, and now, if they really want to help the child that they claim to love, they have to keep it aside. So now I just want to see what comes first for them, my brother or their pride. Update 2. 10 days have passed since I last spoke to my parents, and after a while, I had just stopped responding to their messages. So now, they showed up at my place again. A couple of hours ago, they visited me again, but this time, they brought my brother along with them, and it was bad. At the door itself, I told them that they could not do this, and if anything, their behavior was only damaging their chances of getting anything out of me. Because I was not comfortable with them doing this, not even to my brother, since I could only imagine how dehumanizing it was to be used as a puppet. I told them to get out, and for a while, they refused to move and told me that if I wanted them to leave, I would have to promise them that I would help them as soon as I could. I told him that I would not be making any promises of the sort, and if they tried to mess with me, I would call the police on them, and that would not be too good for them, given the condition of my brother. That scared them, and they left, but my dad told me that both my grandmother and I were the most selfish people on the planet. And that's coming from them, considering how they dumped me on her doorstep, just because they could not deal with a special needs kid. Actually, they did not want to deal with me, because I was not the perfect little boy that they had expected me to be. If my grandmother and I are selfish, the words that they are have not even been invented yet. Update 3. Hi, so I kinda forgot to post here because I got really busy with work. Anyway, almost 2 months have passed since my last update, and a lot of things have changed. For instance, my parents are blocked now and they have no way to contact me anymore because I have moved into a better apartment, in a new neighborhood. So, they don't have the address to that, and this time, I have made it known to all my relatives that they are not supposed to give out my address to anybody, especially my parents. Because the last time, somebody had decided that my parents deserved to know where I lived since their son was suffering and had given them my address. Which is how they had to come to contact me, but this time, I made sure that that was not going to happen. Anyway, after the last time that we spoke when my dad called me selfish, I decided to block them after that. Because honestly, I did not want this drama anymore. They had shown me that for them, their pride was always going to come first. It came above every single thing in their life, even the son that they claimed to actually love. I can accept that they never loved me and never wanted me because of my dyslexia and ADHD and the plethora of problems that I had. But my brother was somebody who they had always claimed they loved and was perfect to them, so how they could not make one little sacrifice for him was beyond me. All they had to do was acknowledge that they had made a mistake. It would have been pretty easy to do as well because, even though we had tried our best to keep things private, most of our family was already aware of the bad blood between us. So it was not like they were going to acknowledge something that nobody had known. Even then, they did not want to apologize for the mistakes because in their heads, they had never done anything wrong and they were perfect. Well, they can keep their beliefs to themselves. And I'm going to keep my inheritance for myself, fair enough.